All right, first I want to ask each one of you that way. First, where are you from?
I'm from the Bronx, New York, born and raised there, and that's where I'm from.
Okay. Where are you
I'm from Willow Run, Michigan, and very proud of it.
All right. So for each of you, how did you get into music?
Well, no one in my family has a musical career, so the likelihood of music being my career was like the furthest thing from my mind. But because I was in the church and because I was able to play piano, I was always in a musical world and actually met Nick in a church in Harlem, and we started to write gospel songs together, and it was a natural thing because we had such a great synergy together, and that began our career as writers.
I began my interest in music. I think I was a janitor at Willow Run Baptist Church, and I would clean the church, and there was this beautiful piano just staring at me. And I said, I started tickling the keys, and I said, And then I think the spirit in the church God just came down on me and said, sit down, you can play a little bit. And of course the first thing I played was Heart and Soul, but I developed myself from there, and I think just a simple thing like that inspired my passion for music.
Okay. What about your musical influences?
When I think of my earliest musical influences, I have to think about people like Nina Simone, who sang and played, so I emulated her, and she was very eccentric and bold, so I liked that a lot. And then there was Aretha Franklin, who also sang and played. So those are the ladies I looked at because they reminded me of the possibility of what I might be able to do. And then all the gospel singers, like the Caravans, they had a great influence on me too.
Yeah. I was basically influenced by gospel music. I think my parents raised me in the church. Although I didn't like Bible studies, I loved the music. It sort of like just inspired me, and I couldn't wait till I joined the choir so I could be a part of it. But you have to be a certain age, even to be in the junior choir. So I waited for my turn and finally it happened.
So you talked about the church as being a big influence on your musical abilities. Is that where you got your education, you think, for music, or did you take a different educational path towards music?
Well, I got my education for music primarily from the church. But even before that, I just found that I was able to play by ear. And so before I even got to church, I just knew how to play. It was just a God-given gift. And so when I got to church, when the ladies would start singing in one key and change to another key, I learned how to just do that naturally. And so, that was just a natural gift. And then I started to take lessons, studied classical music, and all of that just brought more color to my playing and what I was able to do.
Well, kind of like Belle, I was influenced a lot by the church. Being a little wild boy, you do little bad things that started. People used to say I could sing real good, but I was still smoking cigarettes trying to get away with it, and I found out later on that that was the wrong thing to do. But, when you're young, you don't know what you're doing until you kind of like look in the mirror sometimes and say, what are you doing? It takes some inner searching to really find out what your passion really is.
Okay, so talk about how Ashford and Simpson came to be. Like, you met, how you decided to become a team, and then where did the name come from? How did you decide on that name?
Well, we had some very interesting stories about ourselves, of course. When I left Willow Run, I went to New York with $64 in my pocket. At that time, I wanted to be a dancer, and of course, I ended up homeless in the park. And for about 3 months, and I went up to, I was so hungry, I asked this guy, I gotta find a place to get something to eat, and he said, go up to this church on 116th Street. And when I walked in the church that Sunday, there Valerie was. She was singing with 3 other girls, and I said, kind of cute, but I really wasn't interested that much more than food at the time. So they took me to the basement, and they fed me, and Val came over. She introduced herself to me, and it was...
He came back for more food.
Next Sunday
week.
I came back for more food.
But we did find out that we had a passion for writing because I had never written gospel. He had written gospel songs. And because he wrote songs, and because I could play really well, he and I just hooked up and we just started writing these gospel songs. And before long, somebody actually came to the church trying to find out if we would be interested in writing love songs, which was a big decision for us because we were really in the church. And then that took some thinking and some pondering.
We prayed, I asked God, you sure, God, is it all right if we write a love song? And I thought I heard him say it was okay, you know?
So what is your process for composing a song? Like, who does what?
Well, we don't have a kind of work order. We really move by inspiration. We don't force it. Sometimes I'm feeling it, sometimes she's feeling it, but when we feel it together, Valerie can sit down and play, and her music just takes me over, you know, and
he seems to know where my hands are going,
right.
and something will come out of his mouth.
Rarely write it down. I just start singing and she keep playing. Thank God they'd been the tape recorder. Otherwise a lot would be lost.
I think we've lost a lot of things over the years, but the good ones kind of linger in your mind, and we try to make it, you don't want to feel like you're working. You want to feel like you're just being inspired, and something else has to enter into the room with you.
Definitely.
And so you have to leave space for that special energy to come in, so that, because sometimes things come out of him that I don't know, he's not even aware that they came out of him, you know. I might play something I didn't know my hands were going to do that, so it's very magical.
Yeah.
And you don't want to mess with it.
Yeah.
So when was your big break? What do you consider your big break?
Well, I think after we had been pounding the pavements for so long in New York, we were in the studio one day and we couldn't come up with anything. The spirit just wasn't moving. And then I said, oh, let's go get stoned. And we went walking out the door, let's go get stoned. And we went to have a little cocktail and some strawberry shortcake. We came back to the publisher's office the next day, and he said, you guys got anything? They call us the kids then. You kids got anything? We said, yeah, we wrote this great song. And it was a joke. And we said, let's go get stoned. And Valerie stopped playing it, and his eyes just got wide. Like, oh boy, that's great. Ray Charles. I hit it for Ray Charles. And the rest was history. He got it to Ray Charles, went straight up the charts.
Wow. So what is your favorite song that you've written together?
You know, your songs are like your children, so it's really hard to put one ahead of the other. Of course, some make greater statements and the world recognizes certain songs. So that has a way of making them stand out even in your mind, and the idea of a song like Ain't No Mountain High Enough, which has been covered by so many people, you know, and watching the little kids still, you know, on American Idol, you know, get up and try to do their renditions of it, and seeing it come up in a film, you know, it makes you feel good, you know, that's one that's going to stick around. Because when we first started writing, we didn't know the songs were going to last, you know, 35 years, so it's just an amazing thing that they have those, what we call legs.
And like on a personal note, there's some favorites, like one of our favorites together is You All I Need to Get By, which I was coming up the steps and I heard these chords and the words just fell out as usual. You all I need, I mean, it was just perfect. She was on it, I was on it, and boom. You kind of know when you got one, you know?
Okay, here's another one. You both are like great composers and performers. Is there one that you enjoy more than the other?
I think it's nice to have the dual hat. You know, when you're writing, there's nothing like it. And when you're on the stage and the audience is throwing love at you and you have all that love, there's nothing like that either. I don't know if you could say one is greater. I think as a songwriter, you probably could go longer. You know, I think at some point you get off the stage, but you always can put your pen to the page and write a song. So, you know, and I think because we started there, that probably has a special place in my heart.
I think with me, as I've matured, I enjoy performing a lot more because in the earlier days, you had to prove something. You had to make them love you. Now that they give us love back because of some of our songs and some of our achievements, I've grown to like performing an awful lot now. I like the love they give me. It keeps me young, you know, it gives me energy.
So in terms of performance, what kind of venue or space do you enjoy performing in?
Well, we've had the luxury of performing at all kinds of venues. Some of the biggest, you know, from Madison Square Garden or Radio City in New York.
Live Aid.
You know, to seeing an audience like Live Aid with Teddy Pendergrass. So, and they all give you a different thrill. They're different thrills. And then we very much like, you know, the clubs. If you do a club, you know, where people, you can have maybe just 300 people, but they're right in front of you. They pull something different out of you. You can't pretend. You can't fool around with them because they just sense you so much. They're just on you, and that's a nice feeling too. So we enjoy each thing.
Yeah.
And how do you go about putting together a program for a performance?
Well, that's very interesting because when you go on stage, you go on stage to entertain and to communicate with each other, you know. And we've gone on stage several times and we knew we were dying. You know, this isn't working. So after a few of those shows where you don't get over, you learn, well, okay, let's work on this a little more. And even a song like, Is It Still Good to You, for instance. For us to sing it on stage, we edit it because the verses are long. And for some reason, live, you get a little more bored. On the record, it sounds great. When we were just sitting there, it doesn't work the same way. And you learn that you don't do the record the same way, the performance the same way as you do the record all the time. But it doesn't always work.
Yeah, it's about being exciting and keeping the audience, you know, keeping their attention. And also sometimes, you know, if it's a crowd that really knows you, then that's a different program to somebody who has to come to know you. You know, they only will recognize the hits, so you have to intersperse other songs, you know, sparsely that they don't recognize because you don't want them just sitting there looking at you.
I remember we were in London one time. What was that theater? It was a beautiful theater, and it was packed. And
Hammerstein.
Yeah.
You know.
And we ran out on stage, and
we got some applause when we first ran out.
And then we did our best. We felt we were dying, so we pulled other numbers we saved for later and put them up front. Still didn't get any reaction. So we ran off the stage, we had finished our show, and they went crazy. The audience stomped and yelled, and
they got up, they screamed.
We couldn't understand how they listened to music, you know, because they never reacted that much.
We had even done our encore.
Encore doing.
So by the time they started screaming and hollering, we had no more songs worthy to come back with because we had done everything.
But they really appreciated us. We knew they're different audiences.
People are different.
All right, couple more. Oh, have you ever had to fight to maintain an original arrangement of a song? Like when you bring it to someone, when you brought one of the songs you wrote for another artist, have you ever had to be like, no, this is the way I wrote it, this is the way I want it to maintain it?
Oh, definitely. We have a great story when we were at Motown, when Barry Gordy picked us to produce Diana Ross's first album. Solo album, right. And the music industry was changing a bit, and like Isaac Hayes had started writing these long songs that last 6 minutes, and we were still writing 3-minute songs, you know. And so we decided to redo Ain't No Mountain. I had a special feeling for Diana Ross's voice, so I rewrote some lyrics, and Belle
put the talking
in and everything. And so we took the song to Mr. Gordy, and he loved it, and especially the ending. And he said, that is great, he said, but I want you to take that ending, and I want you to put it in the front. And we said, well, Mr. Gordy, we don't think that's going to feel right, because the song builds. It's kind of like a orgasm, you know. And he said, yeah, I know what you're thinking, but it'll be a bigger hit if you put that in front.
And he was a writer too, so
He
you
was a
listen,
writer.
you listen.
So we thought about it, and a couple of days, and we came back to him, and he said, we told him we were afraid we weren't going to change it. We liked it the way it was. And then he told us, well, if you keep it that way, I'm not going to release it as a single. And so he didn't.
Yeah, they
But-
really reach out and touch
Touch.
first.
And then the DJs caught on to Ain't No Mountain High Enough. And when they caught on to it, it was over. That song, when Dinah came back from London, I think she was in London too, she came back and was sitting on the top of the charts at #1. So I always tell Val, we stuck to our guns. You know what I mean? If you believe in something, you really got to believe in it. And he was the boss, but he did not control the music coming from our hearts. So we stuck to our guns and we won.
That's a nice one. So what is your secret to being both successful as a married couple and as a team, as a business team? Or is there a secret?
I think, part of the success of our relationship is the fact that for the first 6 or 7 years we were friends. There was no romance, it didn't start out that this was a great love affair. So there's an honesty here, we know each other, we know the good things, the bad things. I wasn't pretending to be fabulous. He knew exactly who I was, and we could talk honestly. So that after that 6 or 7 years, and we were working together, it was a very much a respect for, I respect what he has to say about music, and I didn't have any game to play, So by the time the romance came, it was based on something that was real, as opposed to some of that other stuff I was doing.
I think part of the longevity is, though, that you have to really stay constantly aware of your partner, because they change. We grow, and we're not the same as we were when I knew her 5 years ago. She's a totally different woman now. So if you're not aware of their growth and how they change and their new pattern of thinking, you may lose them, because they can leave you behind because you're still sitting back thinking you got it made and you know who they are. You don't know who they are because they're constantly changing. And definitely this one, I got to keep my eye on her. So that's part of my success,
All right. This is a two-part question. What projects are you currently working on, and what are your future goals musically, I guess, as a team?
Well, one of the things that we would like to do, we were in the process of working on a project, which is a little bit in limbo right now, but our ultimate goal was really to have our songs involved in something that would be a Broadway project. And I still think that's going to happen. And it's like you need new goosebumps on your arm. You need another reason to get excited, so I think that's something that would make us excited. And we're always writing, the songwriting never stops, because you never know what's going to happen, it could be a gospel song, because you don't know what's going to come to you. It could be any kind of song. So we're always writing.
Well, I think I don't really make plans anymore, because the plans I make, they never turn out the way you think they're going to turn out. So I kind of leave a lot. I believe in God very strongly. I like to know that He's guiding my life. So I kind of like try to stay out of the way. I just relax and do my work, you know what I mean? And the fruit from that sort of tells me what's next. So that's how it goes with me.
And I think it's also a matter of staying ready, so if the door opens, that you're prepared. So that means ready in terms of your physicality, so that you look like you can do something, so that you can do something, so that you're practicing, even though you don't know what you're practicing for.
Right,
you are always practicing to be ready for when opportunity should knock, because, sometimes it's too late then. If you don't have yourself ready, what can you do?
I used to wear, when I met Dr. Maya Angelou, she taught me a lot of things. I used to, Doctor, well, should I, she said, Nick, don't worry. She said, do your work. Just do your work. And the Spirit leads you to your work. So she gave me a very important lesson. And I relax a lot more these days than I used to.
I actually have two questions, if you guys don't mind. Well, I'll come over here so we can still get in this camera. The question I have to ask is, what advice would you give somebody that's got a notebook and a dream and wants to pursue songwriting, musical performance, and they're at that square one, that one block? What would you say to that person?
Well, I would hope that person with the notebook and the dream has some creative talent. You know, some people will pick up a notebook and not much will come out, but if you have some creative talent, that you keep writing, because the first song we ever wrote wasn't necessarily the best song. So some people think that the first thing they do, something great is going to happen just because I managed to get down a verse and a chorus. It doesn't mean it's great, but it means that if you keep doing it, you will get better. And also, it's just, nobody's going to necessarily, I mean, well, now you got the internet. I mean, at least the first song, if you want to put it up there and say, this is my song, somebody will listen. You get a hit and somebody will listen to it. Not a hit, but, you know, a hit
Right.
on the internet, and somebody will take a listen. So, and there are stars being made that way, you know, which is an avenue that we didn't even have at our disposal. It's a much harder world now, but it's an easier world as well, because you do have a place to get some visibility.
And even if you do get advice, you have to realize that that person's path is not your path. Each path is different from the other path, so don't think they can tell you how to do it. You have to follow your heart and do it yourself, because each path is different.
And when I think of, when you say each path is different, I think about like a Marvin Gaye, who was a genius, and Berry Gordy, who was brilliant, but you know, Berry couldn't hear what's going on, sat on the shelf for a year. Mm-hmm. So I mean, you can have a masterpiece that the world is not ready for. Mm-hmm. So what do? You have to persevere. You have to believe.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Second question, same vein, I would say. You talk about now that there's the internet out there and it's a little bit easier for people to get recognizable visibility and whatnot. And you also talked about how you, I would say, struck gold in New York with your writing and whatnot. What are some of the variables that kind of like led to that striking of gold? Like when you guys kind of got going, who did did you talk to person X and Y, and then this Z came in and gave you this piece of the puzzle, and then next you know it was off and running?
I think when you're really into your art and your talent, and deeply, you become like a magnet. Okay. You don't have to do too much. Like Maya said, do your work, and you become like a magnet. You draw people to, when they hear something from you, and it's that fabulous, they want to become a part of it. They want to do something with you. You just have to make sure the work is really good, not just mediocre, that it came from as deep as you can make it come from, you know.
And also, you have to be willing to share your gift. We have a place in New York called the Sugar Bar, and on Thursdays we have open mic, and we see some wonderful talent. And they don't know if who's in the audience that night, but they get up there, and there's no pay involved, but they get up there. We have a live band available, and a lot of them have gone on and appeared on Broadway. Some of them have gotten deals. But you have to be willing. You should be willing to sing at the drop of a hat. If you meet somebody on the corner, you should strike up a tune if you think it might help you. I mean, you have to be able to put yourself out. You know, you can't be a shrinking violet.
And also, go ahead.
Well, that's the gist.
I also think that there is a sacrifice that must be made. Sometimes you have to choose between a steady job and the wayward ways of having a career, because having it is very chancy. Now, some people are not willing to take that chance. Say, no, I'm going to devote my time to this. I'm going to put everything into this, at least for a period. So down the road you won't be sorry that you didn't give it all you had. Some people like security, and it doesn't go that way at all.
Yeah.
Not
I
at
mean,
all.
realize that we've been in this business for all these years. There's no guarantee anybody's gonna pick up the phone and call us. You know, but yet we've survived. We've thrived. And that's only because, you know, that's why when they talk about a recession, we started laughing. We said, well, we've been living like this all along. You know?
We keep waiting for the next job to come. I mean, you know.
And some people can't live that way. They want to be sure. You can't be sure if you're going to be in this business.
Show business.
Sure, that's the